They can edit out. Okay, I got time 16. Good morning, everybody. This is the Surviving an FTC Inspection session of the first symposium. We've got Eric Richardson here to present on how to get your robot through the FTC inspection process. So Eric, I'm going to turn this over to you, and let's get this thing started.
Perfect. Welcome, everybody. I don't know what the record is going to be here, but 58 is pretty high. No pressure on me at all.
No pressure this afternoon either.
There you go. I'm going to send people your way, too, so just wait a second. So, Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Richardson, and I've been the lead robot inspector for the state of Georgia for the past few seasons. I'm also I've been the coach and mentor for FTC team Firebirds 8566. This session is for FTC teams. If you're looking for FRC inspections, I'm going to have to send you to Jeff's presentation later today, which is called How Not to Pass Your Robot Inspection. I'll be tuning into that one as well because during our testing, I heard that there is fire and smoke involved, and I just can't wait to see that. In the past, my own team let the magic smoke out of their robot twice, but nothing too dramatic. So I put this presentation together mainly for rookie FTC teams and veteran teams that may have newer members. The first couple of competitions in any season can be a little daunting for a new team, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to get started. We are also having to overcome the challenge of competing during a pandemic, if anybody hadn't noticed. We're going to rely on your team to show gracious professionalism by inspecting their own robots for remote competitions. We have communicated with your coaches about putting themselves or a mentor in the position of formally inspecting your team's robot before remote matches on competition days. So make sure that your coaches reach out to the league coordinators if they're not receiving the newsletter where that information is. So why is this presentation called Surviving the Robot Inspection? There's nothing inherently scary about a robot inspection unless you're unprepared. I don't remember losing any team members or students during any inspections that I can remember. But there are several things that teams continue to fail during inspections even late into the season. I look at that as more of a mark on me and my inspection teams rather than the teams. But we're going to get the information in your hands so that doesn't happen to you. So I'm going to go through the checklist that is in the back of every game manual. We'll be going over the different sections. I will be discussing items that many teams have failed to pay attention to. Surviving the robot inspection isn't just for the teams, it's also for the robot inspectors. Robot inspectors are under a great amount of pressure at the beginning of the competition because nothing else can start until they get their jobs done. By the time your team shows up at a competition, the inspection should be a formality. You should have already inspected your robot, filled out the sheet, and shown up at the inspection with everything that you need to present. The robot, the controllers, the batteries, everything. My team, Firebirds 8566, has always made it a point of pride to go through inspection as soon as possible when arriving at an event. Why did we want to get through inspection as soon as possible? Because then we could set up our booth, we could help out other teams, and we could practice driving and take care of any repairs that were necessary. Please also realize that the day cannot get started. Practice matches are on hold, and the driver meeting cannot occur until all the robots are inspected and ready to go. So why do we have inspections at all? First and foremost, we want to make sure that all of the robots are safe. During a match, we don't want a person injured by an unsafe mechanism or because a robot hasn't been properly labeled. Secondly, we want to make sure that all of the robots conform to the same rules so that play is fair and no one gains unnecessary advantage. I sincerely hope that we all get to meet during this season and have in-person competitions. When that happens, you want to make sure that your robot will pass inspection and you haven't been competing with an illegal robot all seasons long. So a little bit note on safety before I get started. The remote competitions, they're definitely going to be filmed. Make sure you have your safety goggles on and they're proper safety goggles and you wear them whenever you're on video or whenever you're near the robot. So let's go ahead and jump into the robot inspection sheet. It's there, use it, print it. Every time you make a change to your robot, make sure that that change will still pass the robot inspection checklist. So robot size inspection. Your robot and all its mechanisms must fit with an 18-inch cube. If you have attachments for different configurations, they must all fit within that cube without exerting undue force on the sides and the top. The way I've explained it in the past is if that cube disappeared, if it was a magic cube and it all of a sudden vanished, the robot wouldn't move. Because if any part of it moves, then that means that it was exerting undue force on the sides and top of that cube. The main things that you need to look out for: zip ties, wiring that may protrude out. I had one team that had a nut or a bolt that was turned the wrong way. All they had to do was take it out, put it in the other way, and they fit within the 18-inch cube. Also in this section, if your robot moves, it's got to have a robot moves on initialization sticker. Please place this sticker near the power switch on your robot, and I also place one near the parts that move. This is for the safety of anybody who has to come in contact with your robot. FTAs who may have to help you at the field need to know that it may move so they can interact with your robot safely. So, general robot rules. Most of these mainly deal with safety. You shouldn't have any hazardous materials on board. No animal-based, liquid, or gel materials. No sharp edges. There are no hydraulic, pneumatic, or vacuum-based mechanisms on the robot. Making sure that the energy stored in your robot comes from approved sources and that your robot is not capable of launching its own components. Although that would be neat to see, it's not very safe if your robot's launching off an arm. So when it says stored energy, that also includes springs, surgical tubing, that type of materials. So label your robot. This section also includes rules that deal with labeling your robot with your team numbers. The team's number has to be visible from two opposite sides of the robot. That's 180 degrees, front and back, left and right. And it also has to be a specific size, 2.5 inches with a 1/2 inch stroke. Your alliance markers must be present and meet the requirements, 2.5 inches in size and located within 3 inches of your team numbers. A note on team numbers: they have to be visible, so make sure that there's a contrasting color. I love the 3D printed numbers, and it shows a lot of initiative, but sometimes they're mounted on clear plastic, and it makes it very hard to see. So make sure that they pop out so the announcer and the referees can see when they're doing the matches. So robot mechanical parts and material rules. Next, we have this section, and it covers the allowed materials and common off-the-shelf parts that you can use when building your robot. You can find these in Game Manual 1. The Rule RM1 covers allowed materials, for example, sheet goods, metals, plastics, wood, rubber, magnets, materials that any team should be able to get their hands on. It also allows for post-processed materials like perforated sheets and diamond plate, or injection molded 3D printed parts, cable string, rope, surgical tubing. And Rule RM2 allows for COTS, or common off-the-shelf parts. So the intent of this rule is to get the team building and designing their own mechanisms and not just buying pre-designed or pre-manufactured solutions. However, there are some solutions that are allowed. There are examples of COTS parts listed in the manual, like linear slide kit or linear actuator, a lazy Susan, and lead screws. Those are allowed. There are other items that are illegal, like gripper assemblies and kits and ratcheting wrenches. If you're ever unsure whether or not you can use a certain material or a part on your robot, you need to find out in the game forum for the season. The game forum supersedes the manuals, anything that comes out during the season. The checklist could be changed by the game forum. Do not show up at a competition not knowing if a part is legal or illegal. If you ask the question in the forum and they allow the part or material, make sure that you print that forum question out and bring it with you to the competition. As I mentioned at the start, there's a limited time for inspections, and if you can show that they printed out answered question, it will help speed things up. It'll help the inspector find that and okay your robot and pass it. Next up, we have the robot electrical parts and material rules. This section is so large, I had to fit it on 2 slides. This section covers several topics, from batteries to the power switch, light sources, how many motors you can use, how many servos, the gauge and color of wire used, video cameras. The main issues that I run into year after year that deal with this section are the batteries are not secured. The main power switch is the wrong type, and it's mounted near to a part of the robot that could move and might be a safety hazard. So if somebody's reaching in to turn off your robot, you want to make sure that your arm or end effector isn't going to clamp down on that person's hand and give them a nasty cut. So what's your best source of information besides the game forum? If you go into the volunteer area on the website, you'll find the 2020-2021 legal and illegal parts list under the FTC volunteer resources. This document provides you with a great visible representation of everything that is currently legal and illegal for the season. I highly recommend that you print one of these out and keep it near as a reference when designing your robot. That being said, please be reminded that any answered questions in the forum supersedes anything in the game manual and anything you find in the illegal parts list. I can't stress that enough. So, wheel, tread, and playing field damage test, optional. This section is, I've only had to use this twice in recent memory. The purpose of this is to keep the field from being damaged. Whenever I see a wheel that I might suspect that might damage the field, I pull it aside and do this test. You basically take a tile, same material that the field's made of, place it against a wall, put the robot up against the wall, and run it at full power to see if it damages the tiles. Now, just leaving marks on the tile doesn't mean that that's damaging the field. But like I said, it's rare that we have to do this. If you have big off-roading looking tires, or you have tank treads or something like that that we haven't seen before, that would be a reason that I might pull this aside and do that. So, my personal advice section. Nominate 2 team members to make sure that the robot passes inspection all the time. Don't wait until the day of, whether or not fixing the cube, whether or not you're using the right wires, whether or not that you've got an illegal or legal parts list on part on the robot. Anytime a change is made to the robot, re-inspect it, at least the section that applies to that change. If you're at a in-person competition, you add something, you're going to have to go through re-inspection again. And that's part of gracious professionalism. Coming to the inspector or letting the head ref know, and we'll get the robot re-inspected. Make sure you check out the game forum again for changes and post original questions if you have any. Now, the game forum also has answered questions. I believe it comes out the Thursday before any competition day. They kind of finalize the questions on that day, and you can download it as a PDF, print it out. It's really handy. I bring it to every competition that I am an inspector for. Make sure that the robot fits into the 18-inch cube. If something changes, measure it again. Wires, zip ties, and tubing are the usual suspects on competition day. So in other words, make sure that everything's nice and tight. You don't want wires sticking out of your robot frame anyway, because that's an entanglement risk, and you might end your day early if another robot comes along and swipes the wire out. And if you don't have it diagrammed properly, you may not know where that wire goes. So sharp edges, grind them down. Duct tape is your friend in this instance. So many times people want to cut the material and they forget to do this. I'm going to run my hands over that robot just to make sure that if the FDA has to pick up the robot, stop it, they're not going to get injured. Label your robot properly. Team numbers, power switch, and robot moves on initialization. Make sure those team and also your team alliance markers, make sure they're in the right spot. I don't know how many times late in the season people change the design of the robot and they forget to take into account that the numbers still have to be there. So factor that into the design of your robot. Don't wait until the last minute. I'm really nice when I'm an inspector. I will find out all the teams that are competing that day, and I will print out pieces of paper. But those numbers have to last the entire day, and sometimes a piece of paper strapped to the side of your robot just doesn't work. wire strain relief, and entanglement. Button those wires down. So, talked about it earlier, entanglement's a real issue. Could ruin your entire competition day, whether or not you're competing with another robot on the field or not. And USB strain relief, USBs is, if you've been in an FTC team for more than a season, you know that that's a problem. You can find on places like Thingiverse, you can find 3D printed strain relief, and you just zip tie the USB to that, keep it from disconnecting during the day. That would be great. Phone placement. If you're using the phone as your robot controller, make sure it's easy to get to. Also, make sure that all your software is on an acceptable version. Updating on the day of competition is really painful. I've seen it happen to way too many teams. And also make sure that they're named properly. We need the simple naming scheme. You'll find it in the game manual. The power switch is easy to find and of the correct type. I've sent at least a dozen robots in the last season back to the drawing board with power switches. You cannot just get any old power switch. And the reason for that is they know the power switches that are listed in the manual can handle the load for the particular types of robots you're going to do. We don't have to question about whether or not you're going to let the magic smoke out. No homemade batteries. Yes, I have seen a homemade battery. It was nice and wrapped up and almost looked like the real thing, but the gaffer's tape that they use kind of gave it away. So always make sure that you have original batteries and that they are newer and they're not going to burn up on you. Finally, when you show up at the inspection table, when we finally do get to in-person events, and I'm hoping that this happens, only 2 students at the inspection table. Bring everything that you need, because you might have to initialize that robot in a sizing cube. It's going to be the starting size that's going to have to fit in that cube. And also make sure that you have all your attachments, because we're going to have to test it in every configuration depending on the game. So the game materials can all be found at this link here. You can find the checklist, the game manuals, and everything, but I highly recommend that team members also check out the volunteer resources. Volunteer resources are where you can find the manuals for the inspectors. You can also find the individual inspection checklists, and you can find that legal and illegal parts list. So I highly recommend that you check that portion out. I don't know if we've had any questions come in, but I'll go ahead and answer those now, and I can expand as much as I know. Since I don't know the game yet, no particular questions about the game.
Eric, we've got a question here. We've been asked, how will the inspection differ at a remote competition from what you've had at previous events?
Okay, so that was kind of funny. When the game manual first came out, they didn't have anything about remote inspections. They did release a remote version of the manual, and I was like, okay, great. I downloaded it really quick, and I believe the only thing that listed in the manual was go through the sheet. We were going to try to take that one step further, and like I said at the beginning, we're going to engage the coaches and mentors on the team, because we want you guys to really go through an inspection, not just cursory look over the sheet. Oh yeah, that works. We actually want it measured. We want to make sure that all the safety protocols are in place. And like I said, once we eventually do meet up to talk about or meet in person, we want to make sure that the robot's been legal all season long. There's no question.
We're also being asked about FRC inspections. And as you mentioned earlier, there's a session at 2:45 that will be discussing the FRC inspections.
Right. I'm planning on looking at that. Although I haven't been to any FRC events or been an FRC inspector. I heard that when we were on the call the other day that yours includes fire and smoke, which sounds exciting. So definitely showed up at that presentation later.
Unfortunately, the fire and smoke is in still pictures. We had a video, but it has disappeared into the mists of time. But we have some fairly dramatic pictures. And
so maybe everything isn't permanent online like we thought.
Right, and I've got a few stories we can tell.
Oh, another one popped up. It looks like a chat is actually active. So can we get a recording for this session? If I'm to understand, all the sessions today will be released on YouTube in about a week. Is that true?
Everything is being recorded. It'll be edited and compiled a little bit. It will be put up on probably the Georgia First YouTube channel. And we were asked earlier about the PowerPoint presentations. And I've seen an announcement on Slack that, yes, if you want the PowerPoint presentations made available, there is an address available, send them to, and they will be posted also.
Okay, then I'll zip this one up and send it over there to them. So just a couple of notes. If you look at the label your robot, these team alliance markers here, there's actually templates for that on the game site. We were talking about the sizing cube earlier. I have this generic sizing cube, but there's actually plans out there on the FTC site so you can build a cube. That's what one of our team members had, a relative who designed a cube for us, and it's very nice. So those plans are out there as well. But that's all I have right now. I didn't cover the field inspection. If anybody has any questions about field inspection, I'll try to answer them. I'm mainly the hardware inspector. There's also a checklist sheet for the field inspection. Let's see if I can share out my screen here. So if you go, can everybody see, Jeff, can you see my screen with the website?
Yes, you're being shown there.
Okay, good. So this is the game season and season materials right here. So this is where you're going to find your game manual, the one about remote events that I had spoken of. It's a little disappointing on the inspection point, but hey, it is what it is. Where to purchase the field elements and stuff like that. And also how to build the low-cost field perimeter build guide. So that's to build an actual much cheaper than, I don't know how much they cost now. That last time I looked at a field, they were about $600 from Andy Mark. So you may want to look at this. It's PVC and some hardboard. You have the Alliance marker template. And when you click on that, you can just print these up, cut them out, laminate them, put them on your robot. So that would suffice for the Alliance marker templates. There's also the robot inspection checklist. This is in the volunteer section. So you'll be able to get the individual sheets and be able to go down and check off your list. Let's see, things are getting in my way here. The field inspection checklist. This is mainly to make sure that your controllers are of the proper type, that they have the right software on it, who should be present during the inspection. You have to have at least a coach and a driver. And then you have a second driver and a human player if that's part of the game this year. And then also if they're named properly, if the hub is of the right firmware version, that kind of thing. And then they're going to actually make you run party program to make sure that they can stop the robot remotely. This is the legal and illegal parts list that I had mentioned. This is also in the volunteer section. If you go, it actually shows you images, which I find nice, makes it a little bit easier to identify things that you may not be able to use. Goes through all the different motors that you're able to use. And at the very back, they've labeled it in red. Don't do any of this. So like these grippers, that's what I was talking about, the pre-manufactured parts. And even some of the batteries that aren't allowed, including the homemade batteries that I had mentioned before. And let's see. Those are the main things I wanted to show you. Are there any more questions right now?
If anyone has a question, just put it in the Q&A and we'll try to get it answered. Between myself and Richard, Eric, we should be able to get this taken care of.
Yep, and I went ahead and put those links back up there so you can find them really easy. But that's my presentation right now. Everybody be safe, especially during the pandemic. Hopefully we'll meet in person in this coming months.
If no one has anything else, we'll end this session a little bit early. You guys get a little bit of a break.
Oh, somebody said that their Chromebook crashed. How would remote inspection go? So we're going to engage the mentors and or coaches of the individual teams. So they're going to rely on the gracious professionalism of the teams themselves to self-inspect their robots. So we want you to make sure you fill out the sheets, and we're going to trust everybody that you're going to have a legal robot when you show up and we finally meet in person. I'm going to keep harping on that. I hope that we can meet in person.
Anybody have anything else? Well, the next session in this classroom is going to be how to coach a team during the COVID-19 pandemic. We're all
how appropriate
struggling with, and hopefully we got some good information here, because I've got two teams I'm trying to help, and it's turned out to be a lot more difficult than we thought it was going to be.
Well, I'll definitely tune into that one then.
Okay. If anybody has any questions, throw them up there quick. Otherwise, I'm going to end this session and stop the recording. As I mentioned earlier, these recordings will be made available through Georgia First, and we will make the slide decks available. I'm not sure exactly when that will happen, but I wouldn't expect before early to middle of next week. The team that is doing this has put a lot of work in behind the scenes, and they're going to take a little time off when we get done with this exercise. So I've enjoyed having you all here. Oh, we got a question here.
Another one about the FRC.
Yes, that is, Ryan asked, is the FRC inspection meaning the how not to pass inspection? Eric's done a pretty good job of telling you how to get an FTC robot passed. I'm going to talk about the things you should not be doing because it will not pass an FRC. So that's the right session. It's 2:45 this afternoon. I am not sure what classroom it's in, but it's on the symposium schedule. You can go there and just click the link. Anything else? Okay, I want to thank you all for joining. I want to thank Eric for the presentation. I'm going to end the session, and we'll be ready for the next one at, I guess, 11:15 is the next session.
All right, thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Take care.